Greetings, everyone. Here we are again, Black Mental Health Matters, streaming live from YouTube, LinkedIn, and also US of Africa page. And my name is Sister Olorontoyin, and I will be co-hosting with Idris Gaines. We have... Go ahead, Idris.
Hi, good morning. Dave, thank you for having me on the show. It is a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to today's conversation.
Yes, thank you. And our topic today is a very interesting one, and that is how does racism, bigotry, and discrimination create a Black mental health crisis? And we have several guests today, and one of our guests is already there. Abby, please introduce yourself and welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm Abby Anka, or you can call me Abby, and I'm a investigative journalist, but I'm also a founder of a platform that focuses on young men and providing safe spaces for them to come together and meet other men and talk about life stresses.
Thank you. And yes, Idris, you prepared already some statistics on this topic.
Yes. Um, as we all may be aware, nearly most Black people are 20% more likely to report serious psychological distress than their white counterparts. Additionally, mental health and behavioral health conditions are more common in the criminal justice system. Approximately 50 to 70% of Black youth in the DJJ system have some diagnosed mental health condition. With these statistics in mind, we must ask ourselves the question, how is it that mental health is so disproportionately impacted for Black people compared to their white peers? And Abby, if you'd like to jump in on that question. I think you're muted, Abby.
Idris, if you could maybe lower the volume, maybe the microphone is not so sensitive.
For me?
Just a little bit. Not you, Idris. Just to reduce the volume a bit.
Got it. Will do.
Yeah. I guess I can only speak from my own experiences of what I know and my own research, but having spoken to some of the men who are part of the platform or throughout my research, one key thing they say is that growing up, particularly if they're from an African background, mental health is just never spoken about. And when it is, and you start speaking about mental health or getting some sort of support, they're kind of pushed away from even going to see a doctor or a therapist, because there's this assumption that if I go and see someone, I'm just going to be strapped up and put in some sort of home and that's it. This idea that seeking help will lead to being put in some ward. So there's still a lot of, I would say, stigma, lack of education around the idea of getting help and what that looks like. A lot of the men I spoke to, they only ever knew about CBT, for example, and not the other various levels of therapy they can take part in. So I think the fact that these conversations, particularly I know back home in Africa, are still very new and we're not having them yet could be another reason.
Thank you. And I take the opportunity to welcome our guests, Dr. Sharian Brown, who is an expert in the field of social work, as well as a clinician. Dr. Sharian Brown, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. My name is Dr. Sharian Brown. So I live in Kentucky, so my allergies are a little messed up right now. But I am from Lexington, Kentucky. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Kentucky, and I work in the public school system where I am right now. And I've been in the field of social work for a little over 10 years.
Thank you. And Dr. Brittany Reed, welcome very much. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Brittany Reed. I am a clinician. I also am a mental health practitioner at a school system here in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of Kentucky and North Central University. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, over to you, Idris.
Thank you. Next question for our panel. Black people, people of color, marginalized groups experience life differently than those with power. How does racism, covert or overt, impact the mental health of Black people and other marginalized groups?
Feel free to take the question.
And Dr. Brown, can I just go to you for that question and you can start us off?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of the best way to say this, but when you think about it, even going back as far as clinical work starts, the DSM-5 and things like that were not even created for Black people. You know, they were made by white men. Um, Definitely needs to be updated. But also, when you think about everything that I always say during the pandemic, yes, we had the pandemic with COVID-19. We also had the pandemic of racism. I think it. I don't think that it became something new. I think it just became heightened because we're all at home, and we're all seeing it more. And so I think that Black people as a race, we have to deal with um, our own mental health problems related to staying at home, COVID-19, and then we also had to deal with watching the Breonna Taylor trial, with watching George Floyd dealing with racism also. That makes a huge impact, and a lot of Black people do not seek mental health help. It's not a norm. It needs to be, but it's not. So when you think about all these things put together, the impact is huge.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And I want to jump to Dr. Reed and Abby, but I do want to add in a follow up to this. So, that being said, regarding the DSM 5 and the diagnosing of mental health conditions, does representation matter when it comes to the mental health field? And I will go to Abby on that one, and then Dr. Reed, you can jump in as well.
Yeah, it definitely does matter. I mean, when I was doing my research before starting the platform for men, so Black, Asian, ethnic minority men, a lot of the things they were saying is that, I want to speak with someone who understands where I'm coming from, who understands my culture, who understands my background. It's not a guarantee that they'll be the best therapist for me, but I don't want to have to sit there and be explaining, oh, this is my upbringing, this is my culture, or these are the barriers that I face as a Black man or as an Asian man. So those were some of the frustrations they felt when, because there are Black people who do actually go to therapy and who want therapy and who try to get therapy, but when they do get that therapy, over here in the UK anyway, most times it's with the white woman, white man, and as nice as that person may be, there's that thing of explaining, okay, this is what I mean by this is what I'm going through, this is the culture, this is everything. So they were frustrated that they spent like an hour having to explain to their therapist certain things just for their therapist to now be able to help them. So I think representation definitely does matter a lot, because, and I would say particularly, for men in particular as well, because they were saying, look, I already find it so hard to speak up. I want to know that when I do finally go and speak up, it's going to be another fellow brother. I want to be open. I want to be myself. I don't want to keep holding back. So yeah.
Thank you, and Dr. Reed.
I think yes, representation is a huge thing. Just to piggyback off what Dr. Brown said, she specifically talked about the DSM-5, but we also can even go back further. This field, social work, therapy, this field was created, but it also wasn't created to serve people like us. A lot of these
Mm-hmm.
and these professions were not created for us to be their clients and the people that they serve. So that's also a barrier. That's a historical barrier that we are facing as people of color trying to maneuver through these different fields of service. So that's one piece to it. And to also add to Dr. Brown, I think, yes, historically, on statistic wise, African American people don't necessarily access service when compared to as much as when compared to other races. But I think, as she mentioned, with COVID-19 and the pandemic and everything that we had to experience through um, racial injustice and all of that, it did um, increase the access of services through the African American community, right? So whereas where us social workers and us therapists, we've been screaming from the mountains like, hey, you all need to get services, get therapy, we need help for the community, we need to address these issues. Now people are starting to access services more because of all those different barriers. But then as a barrier to that, realistically, there's not a lot of people of color in the field. So that's another barrier that we are experiencing. So yes, with everything that we've had that's been going on, we really want to have people of color that look like us, because they understand our struggle. They understand the systematic racism. They understand microaggressions. They understand how it feels to just be a Black person, a person of color, maneuvering through the world and through these different spaces, because we know, just by the color of our skin and just by us existing, people already have preconceived notions and stereotypes that they place on us. I'm a doctor out here in this world, right? But when I show up, I'm showing up as a Black woman. So, you know, just by that alone, I'm already having all these things that's against me. So when I do go to therapy to feel like I can release and I can actually take off that hat of strength that we as Black people and also Black women carry on our shoulders every single day. We want to have someone that looks like us, that can at least understand us, and you know have the idea that someone that can speak the language of us, someone that know, like, that can say, girl, yes, I feel you. Just having those type of dialogues in a session with somebody that looks like you, what it means, and you feel comfortable, right? And because we have our own dialect and even our own looks that we have within our culture, having a person like that looks like you, that you're working with, is very important. And I think, especially with the shift in access and mental health service, is more needed now more than ever.
Wow. To know that we need people who look like us because they understand the struggle. They speak the language of our emotions and experiences. That is so very powerful. Thank
I was
you.
going to say, if it's okay, before you move
Yes,
on,
go ahead.
touching on what Dr. Reed said, one thing as well that I think is not spoken about as much is, how can I explain it? This assumption that when you're grieving or going through something, you have to react in a certain way. So I'll give an example. When I lost a good friend of mine to knife crime, it took me a very long time to see how I was affected. I was impacted, like, mentally, but you couldn't see that on the outside. When I did my first kind of therapy session, the woman said to me, "Oh, you look perfectly fine. I don't understand why you were transferred, to me. I think you're fine." So I was just like, "Yeah, I'm fine, cool, bye." Because I wasn't keen on therapy anyway. But then to walk in and for someone to now say to me, "You don't look like you're upset. You don't look like you're impacted by it." For me, it's like, what is someone who's upset look like? What is someone who's depressed or who's a victim look like? And I think that's another type of bias where people have to understand that we're not all gonna react in a certain way. And particularly when as a Black woman, I can only speak as a Black woman. Sometimes maybe when you grow up in a household where, you haven't really seen your parents be vulnerable and you haven't seen how they actually, be emotional. So you've grown up with that, right? So how you are emotional is not how typically other people are. So I think there's another type of bias and assumptions that needs to be checked.
Much. Let me take the opportunity to welcome Dr. Montreal Pryor, a practitioner scholar in the field of school social work. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I know I kind of got on here late. I had some technical difficulties, but all is well. So I'm Dr. Montreal Pryor. I'm a clinician here in the DMV area. I specialize in, school social work, working with Black boys and men, as well as working with Black boys within the area of special education in the school system. So a lot of my work is through the school system or through education in some way, some shape, form, or fashion, as well as integrating mental health in that. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Thank
Hmm.
you. So if we come to the question which we have, I would like to get your perspectives on that.
You cut out a little bit. Can you repeat the
And
question?
that is the nation. Is my mic on? Yeah? Yes, okay. Yeah, the question I'm asking is the trauma of racism, bigotry, and discrimination. When they impact on us, what are the signs? What are the clients, what are Black clients saying? How does this show up in their everyday lives?
That's a good question because what I'm finding is that when it comes to those particular factors and stressors, everybody interprets it completely differently. So it's hard to pinpoint it because everybody is kind of internalizing it very differently. And so I think the biggest thing with it is that people internalize it, but don't necessarily talk or deal with it within that moment. And so what you have is later on down the line, that trauma starts to bubble back up and it starts to spill over in your relationships and your friendships, in your marriage and your finances. And so then you have to do almost double the work to go back to get to the root of that issue, solve that issue, and then work through all the other issues that you created because of the root issue of the racism that you experienced that you never maybe even had the opportunity to kind of sit down and unpack. And so I think some of the signs that I've noticed with people who've dealt with racism and trauma and bigotry, of course, a big one is anxiety, because anxiety is pretty much fear based. It's rooted in fear. So I always ask clients who kind of tell their story, and I hear signs of racism and bigotry. What are you fearful of? Like what's behind that, so to speak. And so through narrative, through telling their narrative, we start to kind of pinpoint some of the things that has kind of piled up and kind of contributed to that anxiety piece. And then from there, I usually find out that it's not just one incident, it's several incidences that have just kind of piled on top of each other. So you find yourself really kind of tearing down this wall of racism and bigotry while also, in the sense, adding, the client's experience is adding to what you're also tearing down because it's almost like an everyday thing in some shape, form, or fashion. And so I think some of the interventions that you really have to hone in on is allowing and educating clients on what gaslighting may look like.
Mm-hmm.
Another big one too that I can think of off the top of my head is setting boundaries. I think a lot of the times, particularly with Black people and Black men in general, I find that we have a hard time setting boundaries. And so part of it is because we don't necessarily know what a boundary is. We don't know what it looks like. And so we typically just navigate this world just kind of internalizing a lot of things. And so I think because we internalize so many things as Black men in particular, it's so easy for us to be able to kind of have a sense of or know or be sensitive to our environment. We kind of seem like we're on edge a lot of the times. And most of the times we have to be. And that's usually because we're not setting boundaries and setting expectations of what we expect from our communities, from our friendships, relationships, and just all the people that we're connected to. So
Thank you so much for that.
mhm.
So this is again Black Mental Health Matters, breaking the stigma in our Black communities. And yeah, please share the link, inform your friends. And I just read some comments now of what our audience is saying. We have Naomi Elliott, and she says, because we are often stigmatized for our mental health, this is a very real reality of unlawful detainments and the trauma from these experiences as well. And Gregory Gray is saying peace and blessings to you all on Black Women's Equal Pay Day. So there's another very important day today. We have also someone saying seeking help is often seen as acknowledging a weakness. And Regina Rose says cultural differences identify management and stigma, trauma, poverty, and superstition are only a few causes of this crisis. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I do want to make a comment on the portion where they were saying oftentimes that it seems like going to therapy is like acknowledging a weakness or
Yes.
seeking help. And in a sense, it is. And so a lot of the times, that's part of the problem. We have kind of been socialized to just take everything and just throw it on our backs and keep going. And that's kind of where you get the strong Black woman trope and the strong Black man trope. And you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to have those conversations and talk about the feelings associated with those conversations. And so what happens is we end up just holding on to, different problems and trauma and all of these issues that we don't talk about. And for Black people, it's even more of an issue because as we hold on to those things, they start to manifest throughout our body. We start to develop even more mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, just to name a few. We start to, see increases in hypertension within our blood pressure. We start to see more Black women and Black men having strokes and heart attacks and dying early from all of these um, natural causes that trauma has contributed to. And so yes, it is very important to acknowledge, yes, I'm in a weak state right now and I need help. I need to actually discuss what's going on and then get the tools and resources that you need to work through that. Because as we go throughout life, you may find yourself approaching this particular situation again or something very similar. And what we want to do is provide you with the tools necessary so that you can be self-aware, and know what you need to do in the instance that you find yourself in this situation again. And also, too, it doesn't hurt for you to go out and teach somebody else how to use the same tools that you learned in therapy as well, and how they can use those same tools and apply them to whatever situation that they got going on. That's also how we break generational trauma as well. And so I really think too, even with everything that's going on, I personally feel like more Black people are seeking therapy, and I like to think that a lot of that is coming from pop culture. So you see it a lot more in TV shows. For example, Insecure, they dealt a lot with mental health. You start to hear more celebrities and rappers and singers and artists discuss, mental health and putting it at the forefront of their music, and then having them to discuss, hey, I am in therapy or I do have a therapist. And I think because of those large platforms, people are starting to see, oh, this is a very real thing. I'm not the only one going through this. My favorite artist is also going through this. My favorite football player is also going through this, and they're seeking help. So if it's helping them, why not, give it a try as well. And so I do feel like though, there are still barriers to mental health, and there are still people having difficulties with accessing care or even wanting to seek care. I still also think, on the other hand, that we are seeing an increase of Black people reaching out and actually taking advantage of what's out there for them.
Thank you.
Awesome. I just wanted to jump in and piggyback on some of the things that were brought up. You all are absolutely right regarding, there are more Black people that are seeking care now, and it is a lot more evident in pop culture. However, something else that you also noted were the barriers. And sometimes we kind of forget about those structural barriers that actually exist to accessing care, and how not every Black person has quality health insurance that can actually pay for mental health services. Or the fact that you could have a wide variety of nonprofit services available, but they don't go deep enough that actually delve into the issues that affect Black and brown people on an everyday basis. So we have to address these structural barriers. And, perhaps some of you have already done that in your work, or you've seen it in your research. What are the ways that we can actually, surmount these structural barriers that exist for Black people? Do we just need to form our own entities and agencies to be able to address those needs?
That's a good question. I think it's a double-edged sword because at the same time, therapists still got to get paid too. But also too, I do think that so I'll say this: there are a number of programs and things that are out there. I just think it's been poorly advertised, and so for a lot of therapists, no matter what their credentials are, most of our ethics require us to have like a sliding scale based off of what you can afford. And so I think that's one thing that a lot of clients don't necessarily ask for. And I think that's one thing that a lot of therapists don't necessarily intentionally put out, unfortunately. I do think too, there are a lot more community based resources, but like you said, they don't go that deep enough. They only maybe provide so many sessions or kind of scratch the surface of what goes on because you don't have so many sessions. They spend a lot of time just trying to get to know you, and then by the time they get to know you and you get to talking about some of the things that you're going through, therapy's up. And so I do think that in order to address these barriers, the entire system just needs to be kind of scrapped and reconstructed in a way to where we do what we say we're going to do and service everybody. And I just think that looks different across the board and across I know for me in the US, I feel like it just the whole system is just kind of rigged, so to speak. So it's very antiquated. And then you layer that with insurance companies and them kind of letting you know who you can see, who you can't see, or we gonna pay you for this, and we not gonna pay you for that. It honestly is very antiquated.
And could we get Abby to jump in on this, just to give that other perspective from the other side of the pond with what it looks like in British society when it comes to addressing mental health, insurance, what they're able to pay for, what they're not able to pay for. Could you give us a little bit of perspective on that?
Yeah, I can. Before that, can I touch on Regina's comment about the churches? Because that's a really big thing, particularly here in the UK. A lot of people are speaking up a lot on the role of the church. Because as I'm sure we know, there are some churches who are very much like, well, just go and pray. Like that's literally it. When someone's there saying, I'm really suffering, I have depression, they're just saying there's no such thing as depression, just go and pray, or I'm gonna cast it out of you. Rather than actually, you know what? Prayer is important, but so is therapy. Here, you need to go to therapy. This is how we can support you. And I think that's a major thing because a lot of, and I'm speaking about our community, those are the people who are actually under the radar, the people that were not seeing, were not reaching as well, because with some of them, they're very, very loyal to their church and very loyal to that community, that whatever they say goes. And so what then happens is I was having a conversation with this other nonprofit asking them, do you ever go into churches? Do you ever kind of, find a way to be a part of that community? Because those are some of the Black people who are actually under the radar, who some of them have gone through even abuse within the church, and they're still trying to seek support from the church. And yeah, so I definitely think that's a topic that needs to be spoken up much more. And a lot of leaders, I feel, need to speak up much more about that. Because a lot of things are constantly happening around the world when it comes to churches and mental health, churches and abuse. However, quite often I feel like it's kind of put under the rug. But in regards to your question here in the UK, so of course we have the NHS, which you don't pay directly for. So when you are going through certain things, you will go to the GP who might see you. However, due to our waiting times are really, really bad. So there are some people who've been waiting a year, 2 years just to be seen by someone. And the alternative would be private health, which is obviously expensive, or you go to someone who's independent and sometimes you don't get the help that you need. So I remember speaking with one man when I was doing my research for my platform for men, and he said, "Look, at the end of the day, there was a time where I actually went to try to get help through the NHS, and the way they responded was, well, you don't really seem depressed. You have to cater to those on the severe end of the depression. We don't have much resources, we don't have much investment, we don't have much time, so therefore you're okay. Go to the community services, go to the non-profits, but right now we just don't have all of that space to be catering to you because you're not on the severe end of anxiety, you're not about to take your life." So those are some of the things that people here are experiencing, where whilst yes we do have the NHS, the waiting times are very, very awful. So, and what you find as well, that there are a lot of people in the grey spaces, so they don't have severe depression, they don't have severe anxiety, they kind of have work stress, or they have family issues, and they're not sure where to go because they're thinking, okay, do I get a therapist? But I don't think I'm depressed, or do I just speak to my friends? They don't know where to go basically, because this idea that only if I'm severely depressed can I go and seek professional. They don't realize that actually a lot of us, whilst we may not be thinking of taking our lives or so forth, therapy would be good for us because we still have other unaddressed trauma. So yeah.
I want to add to that if you don't mind. I just thought about this. A huge way we can break the barrier to accessing mental health is really meet the people where they are. And so, yes, setting up shop at churches or reaching out to churches and saying, hey, we have an organization here. Can we collaborate? Or, churches starting ministries of mental health with inside the church. I mean, I'm sure there are clinicians that attend churches. And so I don't see it being a problem to provide that as a service outside of trying to figure out the nuts and bolts of who gonna get paid or if y'all are gonna, offer that. Um, Also, too, you can meet community-based mental health services within the schools. That way, people within the local neighborhoods can also go and attend the clinic at the school. So that way, you kind of really are bringing therapy to them versus them coming to you. And so
Mhm.
that's a more um, I think that's a newer way of doing it. I'm seeing
Mhm.
schools are, some school districts are already kind of doing something similar to that with implementing health clinics within the school. So I don't see why we couldn't duplicate that and, set up mental health clinics within schools. So not only students can access the mental health, but their parents and other people within the neighborhood can access it versus having to go all the way across town.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. And there, for example, we're talking of looking for solutions within our communities and not just depending on these institutions of psychiatry and systems which actually are flawed. And yes, Regina is also saying that racism is often a factor, no question, but the danger of only looking for external factors is that we always risk the failure of looking within at our own prejudices, bias, and forms of discrimination. So, what could you just mentioned some of them? What other factors could there be within our communities that we can, or even within ourselves personally, collectively, and individually, which we can utilize in addressing this mental health crisis?
Um, I I guess for me to kind of answer that question, I want to and this is kind of going back. I'm kind of late in bringing my comment into this, but it kind of piggybacks off of uh what has already been said. But we were talking about earlier the idea of like the strong black woman phrase, right?
Mhm.
So within that, it has both positive and negative meanings behind it, right? So if you look at black people in the black community, we have always been known for our strength and our resilience based on everything that we've gone to, the historical um, things that has happened to us, even dating back to slavery and how we've overcome what we've been through, right? And
Yes.
so we're seen as strength, we're seen as being strong. So it can affect both us us internally, us as a person, and how we are viewed out in the community and in these and now in these different service providers, right? So when you're looking at the self, sometimes, and speaking, I can only speak from a Black woman, that the word strength and resilience, the positive and negative behind it is that sometimes we see ourselves as being so strong and that we have so much on our shoulders that we have to do, that sometimes we don't seek the help or even understand that we need help ourselves, right? We don't want to ask for help because we have so much responsibility on us that we can't take away from work. We can't take, and if you're a mother, you can't take time away to get therapy, or even, you may have to take some time to be admitted into a psychiatric hospital. But who's going to raise these kids? Who's going to pay these bills? Who's going to do all this? I'm doing all this on my own, and I can't step away. And that's where that level of strength, while it's a positive perspective, because we have that strength and resilience with us to handle all of those things, it's also can be a detriment within us because we're not getting the help we need and stepping away from the things that are essentially that could be, tearing us down, but we can't step away and get the help that we need. On the flip side, as far as the community perspective, and this goes back to what Abby said when she said earlier how she, lost a friend and she went to go speak to someone and they said you didn't
You're fine.
it's that because we have those phrases of the strong Black woman, or because we have all this resilience that's within us, the world sees us as that too, right? So therefore we can't be weak, we can't be sad, we can't be expressing feelings, because Black people are seen as being so strong that y'all can handle anything. So sometimes when we go ask for help, our voices get diminished and we get turned away because people don't see us as being sad or weak. So I guess taking that same perspective and looking within ourselves, and even how our strength can be to the detriment of us, I think that goes back to the original question of when the comment said about the racism and stuff that's within us. Until we get to that point that we realize that we are not strong all the time. We're strong, but we don't have to be strong all the time. We're struggling within ourselves. And until we realize our own flaws and do some self-reflection and work within ourselves, then we're not going to be able to pinpoint those things. And even if you go to therapy only works if you really be authentic and you be honest and you really buy into the process. So even as a therapist, you can come and talk to me and we can talk about all these things, but if you're not being authentic with yourself, we're not going to make any breakthroughs. So it also takes self-work within yourself to even see what areas you need to work on, where you're struggling with. And sometimes when I do speaking engagements, I say sit in your ugly. And I think the pandemic forced us to do that. When we were, isolated from the world, we had to sit within ourselves. We couldn't go out. We had to be forced to sit in our ugly. And that's sitting and thinking about the people that surround us, our toxic behaviors, the things that we allow to be fed into us and into our mind, and really sit there and process and look at all these aspects in your life. In order to make change, we have to at least see our ugly, sit in our ugly, in order to know that we need to move forward to make changes within ourselves. And that could be accessing services. That could be talking to somebody. And I'm not just saying your friends, but actually going to go see a professional to help you with those issues. Because none of us is perfect, right? And even as adults, we just tend to operate sometimes on fumes, sometimes on what we just know in order to survive. A lot of Black people are surviving every day, and that's traumatic within itself. But knowing when survival mode is hurting us and not helping us, when we're moving beyond just this is what I have to do, but what can I do within myself, or what services and help I need to help me get through this.
We also don't have a sense of community anymore. Back in the days, and I'm talking like I was born around that time, but back when in the 50s and 60s, Black people didn't have a choice but to stay together. For one, yes, survival due to racism and all of the other systemic barriers. But I think that also, too, in a sense, with the community piece, we relied a lot more on each other. And so you didn't have to be strong because you had help. You didn't have to, go without, because people within the community didn't mind contributing or making sure you ate and their family ate and all the kids ate. And so I feel like we're definitely missing that piece of it. And so how do we get back to the whole, we all take care of each other versus every man for themselves?
Just
And I
touch.
think, oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was gonna just touch on what you said, but continue. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, I feel like if we could get back to that, we may start to see less and less of the whole strong black man, strong woman trope, as well as a decrease in mental health matters due to the fact that because we have that sense of community, it would be easy for people to point it out and then refer you to where you need to go and treat it like a regular doctor's appointment versus sweeping it under the rug or not saying anything or not even just having the information.
Just touch on that point, because unfortunately I will have to go at 4. But when again, when speaking to some of the men that are on the platform that I'm building, one thing they said is that they felt like in some areas there was that lack of community between black people because there's only so much room for us at the top, right? So let's speak about the work environment and certain industries. You know there's only going to be 1% of you right there. So what then happens is because you know that unfortunately only a small percentage of you are going to be at the top, there then comes this competition, this level of it's going to be me and my people that are going to make it. Whereas, instead of saying all my people are going to make it, right? And they were saying how it's difficult sometimes, but they know that there are certain opportunities that they would love to share with so many of with everyone basically, but because there's only so few of us who will get to the top, and we see all the time, even in UK media, as a journalist, something I've seen a lot where you might have, a lot of black people on the front pages for a couple of days, and then you'll never see them for a month or a few months because, like, oh, they've highlighted just a few black organizations that month, right? There's only so many that they can do in their eyes. So I think that kind of, in a way, answers that community aspect of things where some people just feel as though there's only a few of us that are going to get to a certain point. So why am I going to share my resources with other people? How am I going to make it and help my family and support my family if I keep handing things out? I don't know if that's making sense, but yeah, that was a recent discussion we all had.
Thank you. Thank you. And then we have again, let me see. Yeah, we had the question from Peter Musyoki, who's saying, is there a program to assist persons affected by mental matters? This platform needs to move from discussion to actual programs on the ground. Yes, we are in the process of developing programs which are going to be active locally. And in fact, some of them are already being implemented, and we probably should have a show where we introduce these programs to the public. And most everyone here is also involved in community work and service, which is already running. Could we get does anybody want to say something to that?
I would just like to jump in on that and then also pose a question back to the panel. For a lot of you who are here gathered here today, you are either working in a professional capacity to bring about some type of change or to instigate some type of change when it comes to mental health services and mental health care within your own communities. And I'm going to start out with Dr. Brown on this one, just to hear your perspective. But what are some of the things that are being instituted, whether in your own local community or in the larger community of your state, where you are seeing programs that are directed towards mental health services for Black and Brown individuals, Black youth, things like that? What are some of the things policy-wise that you also may be noticing that are also changing?
Not I'm so not specifically. I'm not going to say specifically towards Black youth, but I think it makes it more accessible for Black youth. So it's something that's been implemented that can actually help. A lot of our schools where I live at now have mental health resources within the schools. It's been a big push. So every school, where I live has mental health professionals. And as the need is higher, there are more professionals added in. So I know just at the school that I work on in alone, there's two clinical social worker, well actually three, because we have a school social worker who's also a clinical social worker within the school. So it helps all children, all students. However, I've noticed that a lot of my students that I see are Black students because they have someone readily available that they do not have to pay to see in their school, providing services for them. So that's been very helpful. And there are more churches doing outreach here. They're starting to realize that there is a need. I've spoken at a church before, just to remind people, yeah, it's pray, but then seek a therapist too. You can do both. You don't have to just do one. Um, I know that there are more services that are offering sliding scales on a community based level. There are also places who come to your home now who also still offer that sliding scale. So you could pay, $0 and they're coming to your house and providing services. Although I know sometimes that's hard because I mean, as Black people, sometimes we're like, we don't want people in our house. But it's still offered, even if they're just sitting on the porch. It's something that is offered, and I'm starting to see people utilize it more because they might not have that. There might be a transportation barrier. There's people who are willing to sit, just outside with you and still provide those services to you. I'm seeing that really big here.
And I don't know if anyone else wanted to jump in on that vein of the conversation right there. For our listening audience, also, we're discussing some of the programs, whether locally, and then also maybe some of the policy changes that you may see in your local community or your state or wherever it is that you're at, where those changes are seeking to address access for mental health care services for Black people, for marginalized groups. What are some of the things that you all might be seeing as well?
Well, I would say I live in Louisville, Kentucky, that area, and I know during the pandemic there was a rise in community services that was providing therapy to people, especially you see in Louisville, the Breonna Taylor case hit us hard. It happened in my city. So we saw, we did a lot of protesting and stuff, and we saw a lot of therapists opening up private practices, opening up practices not only for the community and or free services or sliding scale fee services, but they also opened up practices to provide therapy for the therapist to give them those resources as well. Um, Kind of piggybacking off of what Dr. Brown said, my position within the school system is one of those resources that the schools are providing to address children's mental health. And so with that, what I've noticed is that a lot of people and a lot of adults, they're getting services for their children through the schools, but then sometimes, well, most of the time when school's over and the summertime hits, they're not continuing that service. So one of the things that, I can speak at least for my school, what we're doing is trying to incorporate the family more into the schools and providing therapy services for them so that they can at least get access to services and hopefully have it carry on outside of just the school year. So I know those are a couple of things. There's a lot of resources. I do see that there is a shift in the churches as well, where they are providing more therapy service, and not just the pastor who went to school to get his pastor degree and now he's a counselor. Not that they're actually bringing in licensed professionals, educated professionals to come into the churches. It's I wouldn't say that it was like that 3 years ago, but I do see a trend. I do see a growth in the Black churches bringing in licensed professionals to come in to work with the people within their church community.
Awesome. And we're kind of getting into the home stretch with our last 5 minutes of time. So one of the other things that I wanted to bring up to kind of wrap this all up for everyone is oftentimes Black people are misdiagnosed at a disproportionate rate compared to their white peers. So you do get into the situations where sometimes they may say, you're not in pain, you're not depressed, you're not suffering, so our pain is minimalized, our pain is I guess you could say it's not counted, it's discounted. So how does that misdiagnosis play into this Black mental health crisis that we also have, and then lumping that all into the structural barriers that exist to accessing that care? And anyone can actually jump in on that one.
I'd say it's been very critical. You're right. There has been increases in Black people in general being misdiagnosed from children and onward. And part of that piece is the cultural competence piece. Um, Not everybody understands Black culture. Not everybody understands the entire Black diaspora. And so what happens is you end up having um, Black people seek out or see clinicians who don't understand that culture piece. And so a lot of the times, because of their ignorance, you do see a lot of misdiagnosis without considering what are some of the cultural community barriers that are contributing to this particular person, exhibiting these particular symptoms, or why they aren't exhibiting these symptoms, or how why are they exhibiting symptoms that are different from what I've learned in school, or like how is it being internalized differently? And so it really is a case by case scenario. And but the biggest piece is to analyze one's culture and where they come from, and how does that background, that community piece, that cultural piece influence the behavior or the things that they are exhibiting in front of you, or whatever they're coming to you. And so as a result, what happens is, of course, they get misdiagnosed and they go down this long line of going in and out of services that don't serve them. And it's not necessarily pinpointing the exact problem that they are exhibiting. And so what happens is they end up developing more problems on down the line, because the root of the cause isn't being treated. And so now what we have is systemic barriers that has exacerbated, so to speak, the root cause of the problem. So, for example, you may have a child who is exhibiting symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of ADD or ADHD. And so, though they are exhibiting those problems without necessarily considering the cultural piece, you don't know if this child has a family history of, neurological. I can't talk today, y'all. Neurological disorders. You don't know if that child has experienced sexual abuse. And so, as a way for them to cope, they're exhibiting some of the same symptoms as you would see someone with ADHD exhibit, because they can't sit still because they're hypervigilant, and so on and so forth. And so what happens is, as you misdiagnose, you end up sending them down um, this road of just unnecessary services, re-traumatization, and end up adding on to the trauma that they came to you with. But because you didn't understand their cultural background and you wasn't culturally competent, you oftentimes add to that trauma. And so they end up developing even more mental health issues on top of the issues that they came to you for initially.
That is so true. That is so true. It is really very important to understand the cultural context of the client, of the Black clients in general, but of the Black client. So that has been an amazing discussion. But before we close, I would just like to throw in a question, a closing question to the panel. And that is, we have already said that we find ourselves sometimes in this double pandemic, right, of racism, um, coronavirus, and yeah, every day people are finding them, are calling and saying we're dealing with this situation, and I'm not okay. What do you suggest people do who are having difficulties coping, who are having a feeling of crisis right now?
I'll answer first before I head off, but I'm not a therapist. However, I can say, as someone who has done therapy, is that please do reach out. There are Black therapists there. There may not be as many as, of course, our white counterparts, but they are there. And there are some new platforms and initiatives around that are making it easier to find Black therapists or to find Christian therapists, Muslim therapists. Like, there are more advanced filters now that allow you to actually say, you know what, this is the type of therapist that I'm looking for. And don't feel ashamed or bad if you've had to go through one or two or even three therapists. At the end of the day, don't assume that the first person you speak to is going to be the perfect therapist for you. You know, we all go through it. When I was looking for someone to speak with, I went through a few people until I found the person. That's what I would say. Definitely don't feel ashamed, and it's okay to speak up. But thank you so much. Very sorry to be leaving early, but hope to connect with you all again. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you for being here.
I was gonna add, if you are in the U.S., um, they just, I don't want to say piloted, but they just launched the new suicide/crisis hotline, and all you have to do is dial 988, and it will put you in touch with a clinician that could kind of talk with you over the phone and walk you through kind of de-escalating some of that crisis, so you can think with clarity and be able to make sound decisions as far as next steps and who you need to go talk to go and get treatment. And so I think that is a critical piece, because when people need help, they need it right then, right now. And so what better way than to just dial three digit number and have someone readily available to kind of talk with you and help you bring some of that distress down, so that you can be referred to go speak with someone in person and get the treatment that you need.
Thank you so much.
I would say that, there are services online. I mean, you can type in therapists in my area on Google to find people. But I will say that, I work in the school system, and, I'm out in the community. And although while I don't have a private practice, I've had people that come to me and ask me, do I know a therapist? And especially since my primary specialization is working with children and families, a lot of parents come to me and ask for a therapist. So because of my connection and even being on Facebook and being a part of so many different therapist pages, I'm able to put referrals out there on like a Facebook page, and I'm getting 10 to 20 people just saying, hey, I have availables. I'm available. I have openings, and so then I'm then sending that to the person. So it's just reaching out to somebody, or even if you know somebody that knows somebody that's a therapist, or even reaching out to them on social media. Even this platform is reaching a large range of people, and our contact information is on there. So if you're in Kentucky, me and Dr. Brown is in Kentucky. So if you email us and say you're in the area or in any city in Kentucky and you need a therapist, you can reach out to us and we can get you referrals as well. Even if it's not in the state that we're living in. I think social media and the internet has allowed so much access and so much information just so readily available to us. And I think that, that is, for me, the first tool to use, if, for a person to use it if they want to access services. I think that's the best tool to use, honestly.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, and I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of Dr. Reed. We are in Kentucky, and I have a private practice, but I've noticed that I've had to refer out too because I only see like certain age groups and things like that. But there are different websites. There's Google. There's Psychology Today. There are even I just saw where someone mentioned that there's apps being developed. But there are even online apps where you can, get therapy from someone um, just that you find online. So definitely use those internet sources and then people to be able to get to be able to reach out to someone to provide therapy. And I also say don't settle for a therapist. I offer a lot of therapists offer free consultations for a reason. That's one thing that I do. I offer free consultations because that gives us time to talk so you can see if I'm even the right fit for you. Don't settle for someone just because you're trying to find a therapist and you just want to get one person. You might have to see that one person for that one time for one specific reason, but don't settle for someone. If you do not feel right, if you don't feel like you're being validated, if you don't feel like your concerns are being heard, your voice is being heard, your needs are being met, do not settle. Go find someone else that is a good fit for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all the guests for this very, very informative, educative program and show. I hand over to Idris to please make the closing comment. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
And again, I want to thank you all. I want to thank my amazing host for assisting me on my first time doing this. And I hope that we will have more conversations regarding what we can do to help address a lot of the barriers and the stigmas that exist to accessing mental health services for Black people. I appreciate you all for joining us and the listening audience out there. And please join us next week.